I'm here today, YouTube, hello, with Dan. He is a 2JZ master. He has more 2JZs than I do. He has a lot of 2Js. But anyways, I have a bunch of questions for him. He's super experienced with it. We're in his shop, Rad Industries, today. And my question basically is, why do Formula D teams constantly blow up what is known as the most reliable engine ever? It's both Toyota, it's iron block, it's inline six. People make crazy power with them, but there's so many Formula D teams that were sometimes blowing up 3 a round or whatever. Yeah. Can you explain to us what those reasons were? Because I think the audience obviously doesn't know, and we speculate or whatever, but someone like yourself knows exactly why these people are.
Okay, not exactly. I have an idea, or I have a good idea of most of why they happened, or like we can like go down the list of drivers that were smoking engines, and I'll tell you why and what happened with.
I love that. And then you can tell us why some people are super successful, like the 3 liters and the Worthhouse cars were stupid reliable, weren't they?
Yeah.
And they did an amazing job. So let's start with the ones that blew up the most. Who is the most blown up JZ in Formula D?
Most blown up? I don't know. I know you guys want to say it's Ryan Turk, but like if you go back through all the history of Ryan Turk when he was running a JZ, he probably blew up 2 motors outside of that one round at Irwindale where he blew up 3 in a weekend. So that's like, so let's give him 5 blown up motors. He probably doesn't like to have me say all this negative stuff, but like, so it's kind of the engine builder and the guy that was trying to rebuild it that time at Irwindale. So like he blew up 1 motor, and I think it's something wrong with the oiling system on that particular one, because like it was starving the motor of oil, and then they kept reusing the same oil cooler, the same lines, and they're trying to brake clean it out. You cannot do that. And then when you put all that like dirty metallic oil that was stuck in the oil cooler and wherever else it was, and you put a fresh block in there, and you pump some like 10% of the oil is all contaminated with like bearing material, you're gonna start smoking the next one and the next one. And I remember that round because I was already doing FD at that time. I looked over when they were rebuilding it, and he had like the motor apart in like the dirtiest of situations. It's supposed to be like put together in a clean room if you can and whatnot. He was not doing that. So anyways, he's running a front sump here. Take a look over here. This is a front sump. So a front sump oil pan, think about it this way: when you like start flooring it and the G-forces pull the oil back here, and it's trying to pick up oil in the front of the engine down here, it's not all gonna make it back down there and stay there. It's gonna like run back there, and you're gonna start, starving the engine of oil, and you're gonna spin the bearing. So Ryan Turk did that. He did not have dry sump, so he did that. He smoked like over and over the engines that way. The other engines he smoked at the beginning of the season, he was doing a stroker. These were all strokers, by the way. You cannot rev a stroker like to the moon like you could with a 3 liter. So let's say you're going 8,000 and above with a stroker. It has too much, stroke on the crank where it's like taking the rods and everything and like, putting extra stress on it. And then you're gonna add in 8,000 RPMs, and you'll start to, the front of the crank will start to walk, and then you'll grenade your stock oil pump. So if you want to play with fire, rev a stroker to 8,600, and you'll just blow them up consistently. And Ryan Turk is like proof of that. Then Ken Gucci's the second guy that did that, was revving him to 8,400, and he had a front sump. The reason like certain people had like endless success with a stroker like myself is I'm not gonna over rev it, so I stop it at 7,850. I run a rear sump just because of my chassis, luckily, utilizes a rear sump. So when the oil starts pulling to the back, it's putting it right into the rear, of the motor. So the G-force is pulling the oil back. It's right there where it needs to be, and it sucks it back into the motor, and everything's good, and it keeps going.
Huge shout out to all the sponsors of Drift Week, starting with BC Racing Custom Coilovers, who support more grassroots and professional drifters than any other coilover company. Thank you to WhatMonstersDo.com for supporting all of our content for so long, including our Japanese content. Use the discount code EBISU on their website for a discount. Thank you to NK Wheels. They make so much cool stuff, all the way from my drift wheels all the way up to F1 wheels. Thank you to ECU Master for supporting grassroots guys all the way up to the best driver in the world, James Dean. Thank you to YPlay Imports. If you need a rad top right-hand drive car from Japan. Hit up Trenton at Y-Play Imports and get them before the prices get too high. And thank you to Drift HQ for bringing in that support vehicle. And congratulations on everything that you've been doing this year, Drift HQ. You are killing it.
And then another thing I do is I overfill my oil pan or like the oil system. I still run like a wet sump, don't need to run dry sump. I overfill it by like about 3/4, 7/8 of a liter. So it's like it's way over the full mark, but it's not going to make any contact with the crank because Toyota designed their motors so you could overfill it by 1 quart and it will not make contact with the crank. So then that's like very technical, but these are some of the things that I've been doing and maybe they were not doing. Other people that blew up a motor was Forrest Wang. He was trying out, they made a 3.5 or 6 liter stroker crank for a while, and he was like, that was like pushing so much stress on the side of the block, it was cracking the cylinder wall of the block. So he wasn't like blowing one up where it like grenade or anything, but he was like getting like what looked like a blown head gasket, and it's like a milkshake in his oil, and he did it twice, and he's like, I'm done with these cranks. And then all these guys got like scared and went back to 3 liter, and they kind of had decent success with 3 liters. They might have still spun bearings though, because I think they did, because they had the front sump engines, and it's just because of the chassis they ran, they had to run a front sump. Their only other solution was dry sump. It was like $7,000 option. Like, do you have 7 extra grand to like get a tank, a new pump, and like all this other oiling system? So some of these guys did not do that, and then once they did do that, 0 issues. Like Ryan Turk's last year didn't blow a motor, had dry sump. Forrest Wang's last couple years had dry sump, didn't blow any motors. Ken Gucci never went to that. He just switched, and now he runs a different motor. Let's see, Worthhouse cars, very successful. They probably were built by someone that like had engineered 2Js a bunch more back in Europe or whatever, and like just knew the ins and outs and said we're dry sumping from the beginning, so they never had issues. I'm sure there was a motor swap on 1 or 2 of those cars. We probably didn't like publicly hear about it, but they never blew up. Like they probably just wore them out, but they never blew up on track that I can remember. I don't think they did ever.
Yeah, so it sounds like everyone's just having oiling issues or over RPM with the stroker kit or things like that. Doesn't sound like anybody's stressing blowing pistons out of the things or
Ryan blew a piston out, but like I think it like seized up with no oil pressure or something. I don't know. Like I didn't go ask him that. I just remember he picked up parts off the track.
How about guys like Daigo? Because he was blowing stroker motors. He's blowing
revving billet too high, probably.
Really, he was blowing billet blocks, if I remember correctly. He was
Daigo seems to always blow up everything though.
Yeah.
So I didn't get to be there to like kind of like go and observe, because he was like, before I was in FD, I was like watching, but I wasn't there in the pits, because I was like 2013, wasn't it?
Something like that.
Yeah, I didn't get to.
And he blows them up all the time.
He blows them, yeah. In Japan, I'll see like he'll be like replacing a motor on like the cement in front of his car at the track. I'm like, oh man.
Have you ever seen him pouring like 80, 90 into the motor to like make one more lap?
What?
Yeah.
He does that too?
They'll be knocking and he's just like do.
Gear oil, send it.
Yeah.
I think that most of the people were doing like either like they don't follow like proper directions of what they should be doing. It's not like there's a proper direction list like follow this, but like let's say you were someone that like just thought about everything and asked someone that had the experience in like 5 different areas, and then like put all that information together and carefully did it and said I'm gonna go conservative on my tune and on everything. That's me probably, because I'd never like, hey, let's give it the craziest tune. Like I'm always like nervous. I'm like, it has to last. And some of these guys are just a driver. They didn't build the car. They're just told, yep, you can floor the shit out of it and take it to red line, and they do it. And then, but it was like on the ragged edge from day one, and they had all the horsepower in it, and they just pop them over and over. Like a good example is like of not making like a bunch of mistakes and jumping into a different engine, being the JZ from a V8, is Dylan Hughes. Hasn't had any issues, but he like asked me every question you could ever ask, and is like, if you were gonna do it, what would you do? And like he's had good success, and his chassis luckily lets him run a rear sump. So it's like just it works out.
Do you run an AccuSump or a dry sump on yours?
I don't run anything. It's just, yeah. And I never spun a bearing. I've had issues with my JZs every single time it's the head. No matter what, it's unfortunately been the head.
And what kind of problems?
So I will, if you notice, my car makes a lot of popping noises and explosion bangs, and it sounds cool. And I finally started taking that out this year because I'm like, I'm too old. I don't care about this. Like, I just wanted to not. So what was happening is you're putting a lot of heat in the exhaust side of the head, and I was like, the buckets, the cam follower, a bucket that's underneath it's like above the valve, underneath the cam. I was putting so much heat in there, and it was like, if it's just the right explosion at the wrong time that's happening in your manifold, and then it'll push back inside there, and it would smack the cam's coming around because the motor's spinning, and it'll smack that bucket just wrong, and it would just explode the bucket. And I or it'll jam the bucket like it's supposed to just fit perfectly in there, It'll jam it and just then explode it, and then you're like, well, there goes the head. Like, the motor will still be running, but it's just like tat, like a really loud tapping on one of the lobes of the cam. I'm like, great, now metal just went through everything, so that motor needs to come out and be like torn down and like checked out, and probably like start over, like refresh, go back to the machine shop. But I've never smoked a bearing or blew a hole in a block yet.
Really? And no piston problems or anything?
No, there will be one day. Like, I mean, I don't want to, but it'd still be kind of cool to just explode a block. Like, it just hasn't happened yet.
That's amazing.
It might happen.
I'm just saying, like, the reliability of the JZ most of the time is amazing. It's just for a while, a few years in Formula D, if you remember, someone was changing JZs every weekend, sometimes multiple in a weekend.
I think it got a super bad rep on that stroker crank, the 3.4, because people were just, it can go to 9, so they're going almost to 9K with it, and it will do it, but it's not nice to like the inside there. It's just stress the whole time, And the JZ already has like, 86 mil stroke, which is not crazy high, but if you go to 94 mil stroke, which is what the 3.4 is, it's too much stress on it for how long the rod is.
My motto is everything good about the JZ Toyota made, and every time you change anything, it gets worse.
Yeah. If you just left it stock, okay, that black car there, 100% stock, JDM import motor that we'd put like a bigger turbo and fueling and ECU, makes 650, and just beat the crap out of it and go to redline the whole time you're driving it. It just keeps on running. Like, you do a compression test, you're like, oh, it's like just like it was day one. Like, how is that possible?
We run our JZX in Japan, obviously at very low power levels, but I mean,
it's just reliable.
Right, but I mean, I did 9,000 kilometers at just Ebisu without on track, plus just driving between the tracks.
Crap out of
like, no American drift car sees 9,000 kilometers of drifting because it's not possible most of the time. So I was gonna say, I mean, like, that's insane.
That is like,
and I'm still on my same motor, like. Everything's metal in here.
Knock on metal.
Yeah. Knock on bearings. Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much for trying to explain that to us and
Hopefully some of that helps, yeah.
I just think it's a neat concept of, like, talking to someone that runs a JZ super successfully in Formula D and can answer questions of what you think blew up a lot of those other motors. Because most of us just think it's catastrophic, like, oh, they're running too much power, they're getting too aggressive and stuff. And if it's just oiling.
It could have been slightly on the tune on some of them, but like when you see their pistons, I bet they're not torched. I think it's always oiling.
How about Adam? He smoked a couple Titan motors, didn't he?
Yeah, but like, I don't know the exact reason, because they would always be like, something happened, and they wouldn't let me see stuff. But like, I know that they had bearing material a couple of the times, but he did not have dry sump at the beginning, I don't think, and he has to run a front sump. So like, an FRS GT86, like this car behind us, has to run a front sump, and every S chassis has to run a front sump. So you're just asking, it's like playing with fire.
His was dry sump though, wasn't it?
Now it is, or this year it was, but he smoked an engine this year, and I'm like, what happened? He's like, cylinder, whatever, like, is torched, like, it doesn't have any compression like that. So that's like a tune thing. But he might have said, like, hey, we're at Irwindale, give it everything it's got, and it didn't go so well.
Yeah.
But I did that.
Were those billet blocks?
No, he doesn't have, no.
Oh, I thought he had a billet block one. Maybe that was early on.
Yeah. So far, just Ryan literal with the billet block.
How does that work for him? How do you like RBs and
Yeah, RVs are just so complicated.
Why?
They don't have.
Because they're not engineered by Toyota?
Well, no. Nissan probably tried to do a good job, but like their oil pump is smaller, so they have less oiling. They like if you look at a JZ, it has all these drain backs on the side of the block. So it's like the oil that was in the head is just rushing back into the pan, which then gets pumped back through the system. The RB like does not get to have any of that convenience of nice drain back, so it gets trapped in the head when you're at high RPMs. Drifting's all high RPMs.
Don't all those guys have to make like a tube on the outside of the
big
motor?
Fat tube on the outside of the motor to go back, and it's like that's not going to work as good as like Toyota engineered this one. And it's like Toyota did a horrible motor when they did the 7M. Which is like exactly just as horrible as an RB, and like
you just compared the RB to a 7M.
Yes, it literally is. And then you're like, okay, like I almost think Toyota just got like super lucky and like over-engineered this simple like a diesel engine. It just happens to work, and we all love it. But like, it's not like they knew what they were that it was gonna be this successful for this long. They didn't know that. They couldn't. It was like luck, I think.
Really?
Or
you don't think they put that much engineering into it?
Maybe.
Because like the LS1 definitely had that much thought and engineering and mistakes and all the other small blocks.
And LS1 is like the Jay-Z of America or whatever.
They were standing on the shoulders of blown head gaskets on S7Ms, and they learned all their lessons.
Maybe they did. Okay, and they dumped extra like development money, and it turned out great. I don't know, but the Nissan, like, if you like had been working on as many JZs as me, and then you have to do an RB, you're just like, my God, why did they do this? Why do we have to do this? Like, what were they thinking back then? It's like 3 steps when it only needs to be 1 step on everything on that motor. So I don't know. You could make it good, I'm sure, but I just don't like it.
Could you imagine complicating your life and running an RB in Formula D?
I would not. I would have to quit. If I had to run that, I'm like, I'm done with FD.
All right, my last question. I just had an idea.
Okay.
I was talking to you about your 2022 season and stuff like that. Is there any type of JZ modification or any change to yours that you would see going forward into the future as like a game changer? Or are these so well sorted now? It's just a race engine, you pop in, you don't think about it. You know your engine package is basically the same for 3 years, and there's nothing on the table you want.
I don't want to make a change to my current one. Like, I don't even want to put dry sump. That might be cool, but there's nothing that I'm like, I wish I had that on my motor.
That's a good feeling.
Yeah, but like, I know it's not like the best motor in like the whole series, but it's the motor that came in that car, and I really like to keep it a purebred, and I love the way it's been working, so I'm not changing anything.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Boom.